Buddy, let's listen to the president. He's talking about Greenland right now, 20 minutes into his address at the World Economic Forum. And then we'll come back and talk to you about today's episode.
And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States. We're a great power, much greater than people even understand. I think they found that out 2 weeks ago in Venezuela. We saw this in World War II, when Denmark fell to Germany after just 6 hours of fighting and was totally unable to defend either itself or Greenland. So the United States was then compelled, we did it, we felt an obligation to do it, to send our own forces to hold the Greenland territory, and hold it we did at great cost and expense. They didn't have a chance of getting on it, and they tried. Denmark knows that. We literally set up bases on Greenland for Denmark. We fought for Denmark. We weren't fighting for anyone else. We were fighting to save it for Denmark. Big, beautiful piece of ice. It's hard to call it land. It's a big piece of ice. But we saved Greenland and successfully prevented our enemies from gaining a foothold in our hemisphere. So we did it for ourselves also. And then after the war, which we won it big. Without us, right now you'd all be speaking German and a little Japanese, perhaps. After the war, we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that? But we did it. But we gave it back. But how ungrateful are they now? So now our country and the world face much greater risks than it did ever before because of missiles, because of nuclear, because of weapons of warfare that I can't even talk about. 2 weeks ago, they saw weapons that nobody ever heard of. They weren't able to fire one shot at us. They said, what happened? Everything was discombobulated. They said, we've got them in our sights. Press the trigger, and nothing happened. No anti-aircraft missiles went up. There was one that went up about 30 feet and crashed down right next to the people that sent it. They said, what the hell is going on? Those defensive systems were made by Russia and by China. So they're going to go back to the drawing boards, I guess. Greenland is a vast, almost entirely uninhabited and undeveloped territory. It's sitting undefended in a key strategic location between the United States, Russia, and China. That's exactly where it is, right smack in the middle. Wasn't important nearly when we gave it back. You know, when we gave it back, it wasn't the same as it is now. It's not important for any other reason, you know, everyone talks about the minerals. There's so many places. There's no rare earth, no such thing as rare earth. There's rare processing, but there's so much rare earth. And this, to get to this rare earth, you got to go through hundreds of feet of ice. That's not the reason we need it. We need it for strategic national security and international security. This enormous unsecured island is actually part of North America, on the northern frontier of the Western Hemisphere. That's our territory. It is therefore a core national security interest of the United States of America. And in fact, it's been our policy for hundreds of years to prevent outside threats from entering our hemisphere, and we've done it very successfully. We've never been stronger than we are now. That's why American presidents have sought to purchase Greenland for nearly 2 centuries. You know, for 2 centuries they've been trying to do it. They should have kept it after World War II, but they had a different president. That's all right. People think differently. Much more necessary now than it was at that time, however. In 2019, Denmark said that they would spend over $200 million to strengthen Greenland's defenses. But as you know, they spent less than 1% of that amount. 1%, there's no sign of Denmark there. And I say that with great respect for Denmark, whose people I love, whose leaders are very good. It's the United States alone that can protect this giant mass of land, this giant piece of ice, develop it and improve it and make it so that it's good for Europe and safe for Europe and good for us. And that's the reason I'm seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the United States, just as we have acquired many other territories throughout our history, as many of the European nations have. They've acquired, there's nothing wrong with it. Many of them, some went in reverse, actually, if you look. Some had great, vast wealth, great, vast lands all over the world. They went in reverse. They're stuck back where they started. That happens too. But some grow. But this would not be a threat to NATO. This would greatly enhance the security of the entire alliance, the NATO alliance. The United States is treated very unfairly by NATO. I want to tell you that. And when you think about it, nobody can dispute it. We give so much and we get so little in return. And I've been a critic of NATO for many years. And yet I've done more to help NATO than any other president by far, than any other person. You wouldn't have NATO if I didn't get involved in my first term. The war with Ukraine is an example. We are thousands of miles away, separated by a giant ocean. It's a war that should have never started, and it wouldn't have started if the 2020 U.S. presidential election weren't rigged. It was a rigged election. Everybody now knows that. They found out.
Let me take his audio down a little bit. We're going to keep watching. Let me just set the stage for everybody for today. An unusual episode. The president arrived in Davos late because of a problem with Air Force One, but he started nearly on time. It was scheduled to start at 8:30 Eastern, started at about 8:40. It's been going nearly half an hour now, and by coincidence, right at the top of our program, he turned to Greenland. And you heard, I think, the most focused and sort of substantive case that he has made for why the United States wants to do this, and was relatively conciliatory at times. Haima Moore is here. Hogan Gidley is here. The only thing happening in the world today on our radar that's significant is the Supreme Court. Besides this, the Supreme Court is hearing the Cook case today on whether the president can fire Fed governors for what he views as cause. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch the speech together, what we call mystery science, a mystery political science theater. We'll be respectful to the president, but we'll toggle up and down here and listen to him at times and let Hogan and Haima comment. And so while we listen to the president, because much of the speech now is going to be on other matters, but he might double back to Greenland. We want to also hear him on some other topics. But let's start. And again, good morning, gentlemen. Thank you both for being here. Raise your hand if you want in on the conversation. Let's basically restrict our conversation, at least at the beginning here, to Greenland. And we'll get to you all before too long, although the president may take the full hour. We'll see. Haima, thoughts on how the president framed what he wants to do with Greenland?
I think that's been probably the best part of the speech so far. I think everyone was, looking and waiting to hear what he would say. And it seems like he has finally put together some sort of coherent package as to why it makes sense. And so I think that was refreshing to hear. I still don't fully agree with him, but I think this was the most salient message he's had in the last 3 weeks.
Hogan, you know the president well. Why would he come in conciliatory? What's the logic of that?
Well, he's also on a global stage where he's going to try and partner with these countries. And this is one of the things you just point out, Jaime, that I think is so astute, which is he talked about this in terms, yes, he mentioned rare earth and he mentioned the minerals and the financials of it, but he also talked about the national security interest of it. Yep. And when he came into that room too, into that subject, he started talking about we want to move to immediate negotiations on the matter with other countries. Again, not saying anything about war, not saying anything about invasion, but let's have conversations, negotiations, if you will, with European nations that also have a vested interest in this. But also, I think this point should be made. Oftentimes we view this as politics just started or stopped with Donald Trump. Like, he's not the murderer of politics here. He's the coroner. He came in and said the entire thing's dead. The whole system's dead. We're going to try to find a new way to do things. And so he used that kind of method to point out other countries have done this too. American presidents have talked about this too. This isn't out of left field. This is kind of part and parcel of the national security ideology of this administration and this president. And lastly, I'll say, what strikes me about this consistently is he's talked about the national security aspect of it with Russia and China. That tells me, and I have no indication of this, please don't say I know something about the inside of this, I don't. What it does tell me, though, is that I think he has some intel that shows Russia and China are angling for this strategic landmass. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, good point.
Really interesting from both of you. So let's listen to some more of the president. Again, Scott Bessent said that the Danes were irrelevant at Davos in the last day. And today, the president praised the Danes and again talked about negotiation and said this was in the interest of NATO. And as the leader of NATO, the president's sharing his judgment on prompter for that part. And that was obviously written in a very careful way. Let's listen to the president, bring the audio back up, and we'll come in and out, and Jaime and Hogan will comment as they
never
hear
asked
things
for anything.
they want to talk about.
And we never got anything. We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. Okay? Now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made, because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland, where we already had it as a trustee, but respectfully returned it back to Denmark not long ago after we defeated the Germans, the Japanese, the Italians, and others in World War II. We gave it back to them. We were a powerful force then, but we are a much more powerful force now. After I rebuilt the military in my first term and continue to do so today, we have a budget of $1.5 trillion. We're bringing back battleships. The battleship is 100 times more powerful than the great battleships you saw in World War II, those great, big, gorgeous ships, the Missouri, the Iowa, the Alabama. Because I thought maybe we could take them out of mothballs.
Did the president say that? Did I miss? Did he say he would not use force, military force?
Yeah.
Did he say that?
He said he doesn't need to use force,
Doesn't need to use force. Okay.
but he can because we have a lot. We have more force than
Didn't
force.
take it off the table. Just said he didn't need to.
That you saw so many times ago that you still see on television. You say, wow, what a force. 100 times, each ship 100 times
Hogan,
more
have you been to
powerful
Davos with the
than
president?
the big
That
battleships.
was one
of
trip
the
I did
past.
not make.
So that
I'm
was the
so
end of the
anti-globalist.
story.
I just said no to it.
Yeah.
So
I'm
what
joking.
we have
I know. I'm just wondering how he
gotten out of
stayed
NATO
on schedule, even though he
is
arrived 3 hours late.
nothing
Is that a surprise to you?
except to protect Europe from the Soviet
Oh, I mean,
Union
they could have made it. They always make up air
Fought them for
air
some
time if they
reason.
need
Never
to.
gotten
Planes do
anything.
that all the time. And
Well, but they didn't. He hit the
And we
ground 3
paid
hours
for
behind
many years
schedule.
until I came along.
well, but
We
what was he
paid
going to
for,
hit the
in my
ground
opinion,
behind? I don't know. They may have had
100%
a whole bunch of
paying the
programming or
bills.
things for him before when he got there, some
all
rest, some
they're asking
relaxation,
for
some preparation.
is
And
to
they
get
maybe said, just go with it.
Greenland.
He does that
put
too.
in right title and
no
ownership
fondue
because you need
break.
the
All right, back to
ownership
Greenland.
defend it.
Audio
You
up.
can't defend it on a lease. Number one, legally it's not defensible that way, totally.
Mark Thiessen
And number
had
two,
floated the notion of it
psychologically,
being
who
a
the hell
lease as
wants to
opposed to a
defend
sale. And the
a
president
license
saying,
agreement
nope,
or a
doesn't want to do
lease,
a license. He's a buying
which is a
guy.
large piece of ice in the middle of the
Required.
ocean where if there is a war,
He's acquisitive.
much of the action will take place on that piece of ice. Think of it. Those missiles would be flying right over the center of that piece of ice. All we want from Denmark for national and international security and to keep our very energetic and dangerous potential enemies at bay is this land on which we're going to build the greatest golden dome ever built. We're building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your prime minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. What we did for Israel was amazing, but that's nothing compared to what we have planned for the United States, Canada, and the rest of the world. We are going to build a dome like no other. We did it for Israel. And by the way, I told Bibi, stop taking credit for the dome. That's our technology. That's our stuff. But they had a lot of courage, and they were good fighters, and they did a good job, and we wiped out the
So Twitter
Iran
is saying that
nuclear
he
threat like
ruled out
nobody
using
can believe.
force, but of course,
Nobody's
it's
ever seen
Donald
anything
Trump.
like it.
So
That,
tomorrow he could say,
Venezuela,
we're going to use force. I'm not
taking
sure
down
why people are making this some big
Soleimani,
global moment, but they are on Twitter.
wiping out al-Baghdadi.
It seemed pretty pronounced from our listening, but he did double back in the very next sentence and said that we can use force if we need to.
Everyone was perfectly executed.
But also, you could say that tomorrow.
A military expert told me, sir, everything you've done has been perfectly executed. I said, I know. So other presidents have spent,
Hogan, what percentage of the stories where the president says someone called him sir, where he recreates the dialogue, actually happens?
In return. We've never asked for anything.
Most of the ones I know about he uses publicly, someone said it to him.
Ukraine.
Really?
Yeah. And they may not have said sir, whatever, but they call him sir. So yeah.
The correct answer is 40%. We're looking for the answer.
But last month it was 31,000 soldiers died. 31,000.
I gave him advice one time on Air Force One, and he put it in his speech when we landed. Stephen Miller had to put in. Stephen Miller looked at me like, I'm going to stab you in the neck for adding something on landing.
In 1 month.
And he used it. Said a young aide came to me. So I'm saying that was true, 100%.
Before that, it was 25,000. It's a bloodbath.
Bright young aide.
And that's
the Hogan lore. I love it.
It doesn't help the United States, but these are souls. These are young people. Look like you. Look like some of you right in the front row. They go to war. Their parents are so proud. Oh, there he goes. Comes back.
Axios
2 weeks
alert.
later, they get a call.
Trump rules out using military force to take Greenland.
I want to stop it. It's a horrible war. It's the worst since World War II. Keep going,
take this down a little bit.
World
So
War
Hogan,
II.
if the
numbers are
goal
staggering,
coming into
how
the
many people
speech
they've lost. They don't want
was to
talk
get
about
Europe
it.
to negotiate, the headline is, he said he wouldn't use force and he praised the Danes. Does this now mean that he gets the folks in a room in Davos with Rubio and Bessent and others and tries to strike the deal now? And do you think the Europeans would be open to it because he may have played them into resetting expectations, saying, oh, well, you're not going to invade, so let's talk about a sale?
It seems to be. This is tracking with what he's trying to accomplish, and this is kind of part and parcel with who he actually is and what he wants to do. I will say, though, as my previous point stands, I think he has intel showing Russia and China trying to make moves on that landmass. I would imagine European nations have that same intel, or at least partial pieces of it. They may get them in a room and explain to them, here's what we're seeing, their movements in the seas around Greenland. Here's what we're trying to prevent. The question becomes, does Europe believe that Russia and China are actually aggressing, or are they just kind of like, no, let's just keep things the way they are type mentality?
Right.
And can Trump sway them in that? If that's the case, I imagine you're going to see some of these European nations go, wait a minute, if we're getting more protection and our interests are getting more protection, as Trump just said, it's not just national, it's international security. If we're getting benefits from this, maybe we should have that conversation now that we're past all of we're going to blow things up and we're going to take it over, and they're going to be our 51st state or 53rd if we take Venezuela and Canada first, whatever. I think having this sober, serious conversation behind closed doors with Bessent, with Rubio, may be a really good play by the president.
Yeah, and it's a great point because this conversation hasn't been on the substance of the president's claim that this is in the West's interest to do, and that it can't be done any other way. Haima, the Europeans in the last 72 hours and the Canadians have been more openly critical of the president, more open to the notion of exploding the alliance than they've ever been. The history of the alliance, I would say, and the president's people have not cared at all. Bessent's kind of been in Davos laughing at the Europeans being upset. Tom Friedman's upset. The White House doesn't care. George Will's upset. The White House doesn't care. They might even welcome it. Even they don't even care about Chris Coons, if you can believe it. Does the president's framing today make it hard, impossible, difficult for the Europeans to talk about rupture, or does this bring them to the table because of the way he's framed it, do you think?
Yeah, we must not forget that Chris Coons still has a dream of being Secretary of State, so not surprised he's doing this. But look, I think Hogan made a really good point earlier, and that's one that I've been sort of wrestling with. I think if he can continue to make behind closed doors a salient message that China and Russia are on the move, this may be the great unifying factor of all of this. And it goes back to Hogan's point. Donald Trump is not the first person to invent politics, but this is one of the things that in his first term, he was pretty prescriptive in talking about. In the last year, he hasn't been as direct, but China and Russia are a threat. And if that's the biggest threat, the biggest selling point for getting Europe on board, I think it'll help. Now, here's the issue. what the Europeans, and we all know this, they hate being insulted. No one likes to be insulted, but the Europeans in particular hate their way of life to be insulted. They hate their politics are insulted. And Donald Trump has done a great job of insulting them. And so today he came to this speech with a different tactic. And you know, if you like Donald Trump or if you hate Donald Trump, you have to admit that he is pretty good at negotiating, and he's pretty good at realigning the message of the day. And that's what he's been able to do. Thirdly, and I don't know if this is sort of politics, but it seems like the message of this speech is going to be Donald Trump is willing to work with the Europeans. Are they willing to work with him?
Yep. And that puts the Europeans in a much different place than they were yesterday.
Correct.
And I think,
go ahead, Hogan.
real quick, I think what you saw with the European nations coming out kind of full-throatedly, you know, trying to go after Donald Trump publicly. Now they kind of look a little foolish because they kind of portrayed this guy as some burn it to the ground. He's going to come in and rip us all apart, which, by the way, he has done previously. So I get it. But now he comes in with this tone, with this conciliatory message, with the let me line this mission out using, I think, a message that sounds reasonable and rational to so many. They look a little goofy now too. I think they're going to go, okay, maybe we need to reset all of a sudden and have these meetings. Maybe that forces them to the table. That's I would argue, a brilliant strategic move on his part.
And I don't think, Mark, I don't think he gives them very much time. I think, to your point, he's trying to close this deal before he leaves Davos. And if they're not on board by the end of the week, he's going to have very different messaging when he comes back to the camera.
Yep. All right, let's listen in a bit more. President, please. Up.
Or ever. It's terrible. Costing the typical family $33,000. What they did to this country should never, ever be forgotten. It's early, but he has to be rated as the worst president we've ever had by far. The auto pen did much of the damage.
The president has toggled back and forth. You take it back down. The president has toggled back and forth through conciliatory tone and less so. He said, you can say yes, different kind of the weave. You can say yes on Greenland, and we will be very appreciative, the president said, about Europe, or you can say no, and we will remember. Just to set the stage a little bit, although we have focused and Davos and the world are focused on this question of Greenland and the fracture between the United States, Europe, and Canada. Other things at play in Davos for the president, topics that he is expected to address both in this speech, but also more broadly in private meetings and in meetings with business leaders. Ukraine, Zelensky was planning to go. Last I heard, he was not going to go, in part because the conversation has shifted away from Ukraine, Russia. The so-called Board of Peace, a massive conversation and another point of tension between the president and world leaders, some world leaders, an attempt, some believe, to create an alternate United Nations with the president at the head of it. Housing policy, for reasons I've still not quite got my arms around. This speech was supposed to be a lot about unveiling the president's housing policy. And of course, as I said before, people focused on the Fed. So let's do this. Let's listen in a little bit more. And then if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment about Greenland and NATO and the president's relationship, the AP also joining in with the headline. The president says he will not use force to acquire Greenland. Please raise your hand. We'll get to your questions as we continue to listen together and see where the president heads. So hands up if you want to talk about Greenland, NATO, and the president, and let's listen to Donald Trump.
I watched him sort of be tough, but he was at $10 for a pill. And I said, Emmanuel, and I have all the big pharmaceutical companies are in total agreement. It wasn't easy, by the way. They're tough, smart. They've been getting away with the scam for a long time. But they gave it up. But they said, you'll never get the countries to approve it. I said, why is that? Because they won't. They always said, we're not paying any more. Get the rest for the United States. So over the years, they stayed the same. We just went up, up, up. And I mean, we would pay 13, 14, 15 times more than certain countries would. So I said, no, they'll approve it 100%. Sir, you'll never get them to approve it. I said, I guarantee you. But I actually started with Emmanuel.
It's another Sir story. We'll turn it down. We'll keep listening.
And I like him.
Professor Kennedy, welcome in. Thoughts on Greenland and NATO?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to our community about this, and I was just like, Trump's rhetoric, everybody gets all, it's amazing how he just loves to play with the left with his rhetoric, and he gets them all twisted And then he comes in with a speech like this, which is more measured, and it goes back to his gut, which is about making a deal, right? He's all about making deals, this guy. So, people that suffer through Trump, the people that don't like Trump, still have a problem swimming through his rhetoric and getting to the core of what he's about in terms of getting something done. So we'll see. We'll see if he's able to walk away from this with a deal. And Heim is 1,000,000% right. If he walks away without a deal, the rhetoric is going to change back to that aggressive, bloviating, we're going to invade and all of this stuff. And it's just going to, that's the way Trump rolls. And I just find it funny that people still can't adjust to that after, the guy was president for 4 years and then now he's in another year. We should know Trump by now. That's really my comment about that.
Okay, thank you. Haima and then Hogan.
Yeah. Look, Professor Kenny, good to see you. And I completely agree with you. Anytime I go on TV media, and I've been on with Hogan a lot, I always say this: Donald Trump has told us exactly who he is, and we've got to start believing him at some point. And I think, to your point, everything he says is not hyper specific, and it shouldn't be taken hyper specifically. But he does give you his themes. He's pretty honest in the way he wants to portray himself and his leadership, particularly on the international stage. So I think you're right. I personally don't agree with that style of leadership. I just don't enjoy that. That's just my personal opinion. Because I'm a pretty straightforward guy who's pretty much a political nerd and just want to talk about the facts and not, sort of be all over the board with this sort of harsh language. But I think you're right. We know who he is, and we should. And I think Democrats and liberals in particular have got to stop taking the bait, and have got to just give it a beat and let it play out for a day or two before they respond to something Donald Trump says. I think that's very astute.
Yep. Thanks, Simon. That's great.
Hogan.
Okay, Professor, I think you're correct here in the ebbs and flows of this. I still can't wrap my head around it, but I do often laugh at how everyone falls all over themselves when Donald Trump speaks. And Haim is right. Listen to politicians when they tell you who they are. You lose the electorate. You lose elections when you shock the public. Okay, and I'll just run through. Everyone knows who Donald Trump is. Okay. So it's not surprising when he does this type of stuff. It shouldn't be. Everyone knew Clinton was a dirtbag. So when things come out, they're like, oh, it's fine. The economy's good. It's Bill Clinton. Zoran Mondami's telling you what he's going to do socialism-wise and whatever in New York. So when he does it, you should not be surprised. Pay attention to what these politicians say. But that also kind of goes back to the overreaction for whatever reason with someone like Donald Trump's rhetoric, as opposed to politicians of the past, which have had horrible things to say about each other and their opponents and all these types of crazy things over the years. It's not really anything new, per se. They just try to pretend as though this is the first time we've ever heard these horrible things. But as typical with the right, I would say, the infighting on the right and the left is always kind of epic, and some of the most fun rhetorical flourishes and battles happen. I do think there's kind of a pattern here where George W. Bush was Hitler. George W. Bush is the worst president ever. He's a fascist. And then it was kind of like, wait a minute, I'll tell you who's worse than that. It's Romney. Romney's the really bad guy. Trump gets elected. He's the worst guy. Romney's the good Republican. And then all of a sudden you hear them even talking about J.D. Vance is the real threat. That's the real guy because he's smart and has this affable nature. These types of things are just what politicians do. They find ways to communicate. And if you can win the messaging war, a lot of times you win elections. And so I don't want to get too high here. I'm trying to focus on what we're talking about here, but understand just the fact that people freak out every time this guy opens his mouth. I mean, it gets a little boring, quite frankly, and tiresome.
Professor,
I will say that I have been a little disappointed in this particular speech. I mean, he's mentioned former President Biden like 4 times. He's mentioned the 2020 election. I mean, that was 2 elections ago. Like, let's just get over 2020. I'm over it. I don't want to go back to it. Nobody does. Let's stop talking about it. But the fact that he's doing this on an international stage, it does show that he does have some internal competing priorities, and grievances is one of them.
Yeah. All right, 3 quick things. We're going to give you a little news, then listen to the president for just a bit, see what he's saying, and then Dean from Ohio is here. Hogan, did you want to say
Just
something?
real quick, Jaime, you're right. Grievance is one of them, but understand a lot of the American people have grievances too. So they resonate with that part of
But
it,
they're not.
albeit
They're
frustrating to some.
Hogan. You know, I'm a big fan of yours, and I wore my nice blazer today for you. But look, I don't think the American people have the same grievances that he has. I think the grievances that
Don't
American
disagree.
people have are costs, the border, and safety. They don't care about Jerome Powell being indicted. They don't care about Lisa Cook. They don't care about the Attorney General of New York. What they really care about is a housing policy that will allow people to own homes earlier, allow people to stay at their homes later, and allow for people to take care of their families. Like that's the most important grievance I think American people have.
Sure.
Hogan, do you want to answer the question of whether the 2020 election was stolen? Do you want to answer that today?
I think we have a lot of information coming out that will be quite concerning to people. If I've seen the Georgia admitting they certified 300,000 votes they shouldn't have certified. I mean, all this kind of stuff is crazy. But people on the right and the left have been complaining about elections and their integrity for decades. So to try to put it all on him, kind of silly.
He's the one who just raised it. The Russian special envoy to the peace talks, the interlocutor for Mr. Witkoff, has just announced that Witkoff and Jared Kushner are going to Moscow tomorrow for another round of peace conversations. Dean, stand by. Let's listen to the president and see where he is currently in his weave.
So I'm honored to have done it. Finally, I've instructed government-backed institutions to purchase up to $200 billion in mortgage bonds to bring down interest rates. And I'll be announcing a new Fed chairman in the not-too-distant future. I think he'll do a very good job. See, I gave away some of it. He did give that away. So we have something, got something, but somebody that's very respected. They're all respected. They're all great. Everyone that I interviewed is great. Everyone could do, I think, a fantastic job. Problem is they change once they get the job. They do. You know, they're saying everything I want to hear, and then they get the job. They're locked in for 6 years. They get the job, and all of a sudden, let's raise rates a little bit. I call them, sir, we'd rather not talk about this. It's amazing how people change once they have the job. But it's too bad. Sort of disloyalty, but they got to do what they think is right. We have a terrible chairman right now. Jerome, too late Powell. He's always too late. And he's very late with interest rates, except before the election. He was just fine for the other side. So we're going to have somebody that's great, and we hope he does the right job. Last week, the average 30-year mortgage rate dropped below 6% for the first time in many years. Another major factor in driving up housing costs was the mass invasion of our borders. And I have to say one thing about housing, because nobody ever says this. I am very protective of people that already own a house, of which we have millions and millions and millions. And because we have had such a good run, the house values have gone up tremendously. And these people have become wealthy. They weren't wealthy. They become wealthy because of their house. And every time you make it more and more and more affordable for somebody to buy a house cheaply, you're actually hurting the value of those houses, obviously, because the one thing works in tandem with the other.
What are the markets doing now?
And I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt the value of people that own a house who, for the first time in their lives, are walking around the streets
It appears the markets
of whatever city they're
appreciate the
in, very
president saying he won't
proud
use force.
that their house is worth $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. Now, if I want to really crush the housing market, I could do that so fast that people could buy houses, but you would destroy a lot of people that already have houses. In some cases, they've mortgaged their house, and the mortgage would be very low, and all of a sudden the mortgage without any changes becomes very high, and they end up losing the house. I'm not going to hurt, and I speak with Scott, who's doing a fantastic job, and Howard, who's doing a fantastic job, and all of my people. And I always say, look, you know, I can crush the hell out of the market. We can drop interest rates to a level, and that's one thing we do want to do. That's natural. That's good for everybody. You know, the dropping of the interest rates, we should be paying a much lower interest rate than we are. We should be paying the lowest interest rate of any country in the world, because without the United States, you don't have a country. I mean, I had a case with Switzerland. We happened to be in Switzerland. Maybe I'll give you a quick story. But they were paying nothing. They make beautiful watches, great watches, Rolex, all
Okay,
of
we'll skip the Swiss
They were
story.
paying nothing to
Dean,
the
welcome in.
United
What's on your
States when they
mind
sent their
for
Whoa,
Hogan and
whoa,
for Hyma?
whoa. He was getting into watches. I was letting him hear this.
That's all right. You'll listen to it later. Dean, what's on your mind for Hogan?
No, you've got Dean from Ohio. That's better than Swiss watches. Good morning, Mark, Hogan, Heima. I'm interested in knowing, why is Greenland being prioritized now? Really, two questions. Why is it prioritized now, Hogan? If you could add a little bit more meat on the bones to what you said makes sense. I just haven't seen any reporting on it. And what is the expiration date on any deal? Does it have to get done in the next 18 months, 24 months, politically or otherwise, in order for it to be viable, or does it just fade away?
Thanks for the question. I would say any deal that happens before the midterms would be good politically for Republicans to say, see, we're protecting our own interests, we're protecting the world. It's a political tool. Of course, they all kind of boil down to that. Does it really help the American people, or doesn't help the American, or doesn't it? And I think that's going to be one of the main things as it relates to Greenland. I would tell you, he's talking about the national security interests. And as I mentioned, this isn't a surprise. There have been some reporting. I've seen John Solomon and others at Just the News talk about the concern about Russia and China from Greenland officials over a year ago. They were concerned about the maneuvers they were doing off the coastline there. So this isn't necessarily something that is mainstream, but it's not undiscussed and unreported. It's just something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Greenland's far off. Russia and China really not really focused on something like that. They're worried about Russia and China in other ways. Trump's taking a look at the whole playing board here, which I think is strategic and smart. I will make one point about housing. The affordability of housing is a very key component of this upcoming election, which is good. My concern, though, is that there are millions of people in this country illegally. Millions of people will again apply for loans they don't have the ability to pay off. And if you have substandard methods by which you check credit, then there could be another housing bubble that emerges where people who should not buy homes are getting loans for homes, getting mortgages, and that's going to be a big problem for this country down the road as well, just as an aside.
Hyma, before you weigh in, some news. Susie Wiles on the trip with the president, as most of the senior officials in the government seem to be in Davos, told the press pool moments ago that the president's going to go to Iowa on Tuesday for his speech on the economy and energy, and says the president plans to make weekly trips and domestic trips ahead of the midterm elections, and that cabinet travel will also increase. That's a power of incumbency, assuming you're sending out people with a message that actually help your candidates. Hyma.
Well, Iowa is back. That's the moral of the story. Look, Dean, good to see you and good to hear from you. I agree with Hogan on a lot of things that he said. I think the president's trying to wrap a lot of this up before the midterm. But a couple of thoughts on that. One, what we learned, as much as Joe Biden, took claim for the Democrats, success, quote unquote, in the last midterm, a lot of that was because we had some really good candidates who were very sane and very salient in getting their messages out directly in their district. And so I think for Republicans, as much as Donald Trump is going to try to be the one leading the national message, if you're running it, for Congress or for Senate, it's going to be you on that ballot. It's going to be you in that district. It's going to be you having to go and sell what you need to sell to your people. And so as much as he's going to try to do this, I don't think it's going to be extremely helpful. Now, one thing I am happy to see, and Mark, if you remember a couple months ago, I sent you a note and said, I think Donald Trump's spending way too much time abroad. He hasn't been around the country in a while. And so I welcome him going around the country and having this conversation. Sometimes when you're in your second term, you can lose touch with why you ran in the first place. And I think Donald Trump is losing touch in some ways. And so it's going to be good to have him in Iowa and all across the country, and have the cabinet members in particular. They haven't done a good job. The only cabinet members we've really seen out there is Secretary Noem and Scott Bessent. And so it'll be good to see some of these other secretaries out there talking about domestic policy. And then lastly, on the housing front, look, Hogan, I think the housing policy, the reason why it's going to be so important to discuss during the midterms and this year is not just about owning houses and getting people who are renters into ownership. It's about making sure that everyone across the spectrum renters, owners, first-time home buyers, elderly people who want to downsize or who want to stay in their homes, making sure that they have the resources they need to do that. And so it's not just about subprime mortgages. It's about interest. And if we have too many people who have bad credit or who have bad issues and are not able to do that right now, what are we going to do to bring them back into the fold? How do we really make this country great again? And that's going into these states, into these cities, and investing in ways to educate people on financial literacy, on home ownership, and things like that. And so it's not just throwing these people to the side and saying you don't have good credit and you can't own homes. One, and then secondly, look, Donald Trump has said that he's now expelled millions of people who are illegal immigrants, and that was going to immediately shake loose the housing market. It's already been a year. It has not shaken loose the housing market. That has not been the issue. The issue has not been illegal immigrants. The issue has been we do not have enough housing for Americans, and the costs in the market have driven costs way too high, and that's just the reality.
Yep.
Well,
go ahead.
I think Jaime's hitting on something interesting here, which is right. A lot of this has to do with there aren't a lot of homes on the market. They're not building new homes. There's a supply and demand issue here is part of it, but there are a lot of factors. Some of these states have regulations out the wazoo, so you can't even put a piece of plywood on a piece of land without going through all types of years worth of regulatory nonsense to make it happen. That's part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think subprime mortgages, giving them to illegal aliens that don't have credit is the credit to have these homes is a big problem, or any American citizen for that matter, of course. But in addition to that, I do think by taking people out of the market that have largely been subsidized by the American taxpayer that are here from other countries, I think that will have a massive effect on housing prices, but it will take some time. That's not just going to happen overnight. But I do think that does matter to the future longevity of the housing market. But at its core, you need to build more homes. That's really the problem.
I agree with you on that. It's like you're advertising the abundance agenda, but as a local government guy, I think we need to bring the regulation down. I think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. Dean, thank you. Let's listen to the president for just a moment.
Super modern plan, but it's happening at levels that nobody's ever seen. In 2024, the U.S. built less than 2 million new homes, but Biden admitted more than 8 million new migrants. And those days are over. In 2025, for the first time in 50 years, the United States had reverse migration. Boy, that was nice. And these were criminals that were being taken out of our country because they allowed people to come into our country from jails, from gangs, drug dealers, murderers. 11,888 murderers. We've gotten most of them out. And then ICE gets beat up by stupid people from leadership in Minnesota. We actually are helping Minnesota so much, but they don't appreciate it. Most places do. Washington, D.C. is the safest place now in the United States. It was a very dangerous place to walk.
Okay. Trying to balance everything in 1 hour. We'll continue to monitor the president and listen. Let's bring in Ellen. Ellen, what's on your mind for Hogan and for Jaime?
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Well, I had two thoughts. First one, just to kind of reinforce what Jaime was saying about the housing prices. I can remember when we bought our house for under $200,000 for the really low interest rate of 6.9%. And that was a great deal. And so I think interest rates are kind of relative compared to the price of housing. And nowadays, like in our neighborhood, houses are going for $700,000-800,000. So 4%, 5% interest rate might look great, but at $700,000-800,000, that's a very different payment compared to under $200,000. And so I would love to see the price of housing become more affordable versus interest rates. And I know that's a piece of it, but that was just a sidebar. The other thing, Mark, I wanted to say, last week you said something very smart. You were talking about your spidey sense, and that one, you were having a conversation with Larry about Iran and whatever your spidey sense was. And he asked you, implying that maybe you knew more information. And you said, no, I'm just observing people's behavior and their actions and maybe things that they're saying. And so I was wondering, are we seeing any behavior or action in Greenland from people within that community that would imply that a deal is in the works?
You mean between the United States and the Danish?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was the meeting at the White House between the president, between the vice president and secretary of state and the foreign ministers. And
that's true.
I don't believe the conversations have ever ended. Maybe the last 48 hours, they haven't been intense, but I think they made pretty clear in that meeting what the United States is looking for. And Secretary Rubio has said to the Congress what they're looking for is a deal that doesn't involve force and that involves some sort of purchase. And that's pretty much what the president said today. So I think it's pretty clear what's happening now. Obviously, beneath that framework is all the questions of what is the deal. You know, is it cash? How do you get the people of Greenland to be for it? Because based on all the reporting that's been done out of Greenland and what limited public polling data there is, I don't think the people of Greenland would accept the United States, even if the Danes somehow made a deal without their agreement. I don't think they would accept it. I think it would be a horrendous situation. Now, the White House has thought for a while that you solve that with a checkbook. You solve that with some sort of initial payments, and then like in Alaska, some sort of annual payment. Hogan, thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah, but Ellen, just drill down for me. What's your I guess your broader point here? You're trying to say what?
I was just wondering, like, well, what is it that the people that are in Greenland, what is their behavior? Are they looking truly interested in some sort of deal? Or is it just sort of a conciliatory, yeah, we'll work with you, and then hopefully it'll all go away?
Yeah, again, I've not seen too much reporting on the ground in Greenland, except a few people here and there saying, yeah, we're always interested to have a conversation. I don't know how far that actually goes, and if those people have enough power or are in positions of power to make those decisions. That's just a negotiation, a conversation you'd have to have with the people of Greenland. And I don't know one way or the other where they stand. I would like a show of hands, though, if I could. How many people like those Danish cookies?
Yeah.
I don't even know the Danish cookies.
Exactly. See, they're bringing nothing to this.
Alan, thank you. Grateful to you. All right, a couple things. First of all, the president continues to talk about housing. He's renewed this thing that he's put out there. There was a statement yesterday. I don't know if it was an executive order or not, but he's trying to stop places like Blackstone from buying homes. It's not a very big part of the market, and it's an interesting proposal, and they're asking Congress to help codify this. Now, I want to talk about Scott Bessent. Scott Bessent has, throughout the last year, transformed from a business guy and a finance guy to a sharp-elbowed Paul at times. And you've seen that when he's done TV interviews. You've seen that on the Sunday shows at times. And in Davos, he's taken it to 11. Said the Danish were irrelevant, has taken all sorts of shots at people, including this one, which we're going to show you because we're going to take down the president for a moment and show you. Because besides the fact that it's extremely sharp-elbowed, besides the fact that it's aimed at the person who's currently the most prominent leader of the Democratic Party, it also contains pop cultural references that some of you don't realize are in the arsenal of our Treasury Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you 2028 presidential candidate Scott Bessent.
That Governor Newsom, who strikes me as Patrick Bateman meets Sparkle Beach Ken, may be the only Californian who knows less about economics than Kamala Harris. He's here this week with his billionaire sugar
which one of you
daddy,
can explain
Alex
what it means to be
and
Patrick Bateman
Davos is a perfect
meets
place
Sparkle
for a
Beach
man
Ken?
who,
Which one of you can
when
explain
everyone
that?
else is on lockdown,
Not I. They didn't land well at all. So I'm not sure what he's talking about.
Okay,
I'm not
you
sure
know what that
guys like-
means? And you know what that means? Somebody put it in the chat, because I honestly don't know what that means.
California people won't forget
No.
this.
No, you don't. You
I know
neither.
Jason Bateman.
Yeah, but what's Patrick
Trump
Bateman?
administration is coming to
Anybody know?
California. We are going to crack down on
All right,
waste.
we don't know.
Alan C said he knows. Put it in the chat,
It's an
Alan.
American
It's
Psycho. there,
American,
brother.
American Psycho.
American Psycho.
American Psycho.
Is the actor in American Psycho?
Not speaking.
He's the character, and he looks
character.
exactly like Sparkle Beach Ken.
Ah,
They look identical. So it's a airhead psychopath.
Airhead psychopath. All right.
That's a statement.
All right, but so in other words, he's assuming we all know the name of the character. Is the name of the character in American Psycho both the book and the movie?
Yes, Patrick Bateman.
Even
it's all right, I like him
so.
more.
Even so. Anyway, all right, take him down. Let's go back to the president and see what he's talking
him down.
about. 'Cause
Take
he's
him
still
down.
on. Take 2028 presidential candidate Scott Bessent down. Let's listen to the president.
Boldness and persistence, let us lift up our people, grow our economies, defend our shared destiny, and build a future for our citizens that is more ambitious, more exciting, more inspiring, and greater than the world has ever seen. We're in a position to do things that nobody else has ever even thought of before. And many of the people in this room are the ones that are doing it. And I want to congratulate you, and I'm with you all the way. You can do things that nobody else can even think about. So I congratulate you on your tremendous success. And the United States is back, bigger, stronger, better than ever before. And I'll see you around. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
I may end all my speeches now with the
I love
line,
that.
I'll see you around.
I love that.
Now, is he going to take questions here? If you haven't had enough of the president talking, apparently now he's going to take questions, and then right after this, he's doing an interview on CNBC. I think it's live.
This was supposed to be a nice fire
here we go.
chat,
Let's listen to
Mr.
this.
President.
Yes, good.
Amazing.
I got set up.
More.
I did know.
You made the job for the moderator really easy. Thank you, Mr. President, for your speech. I do have a few follow-up questions, if it's okay. Sure. I don't think I should start with Greenland, maybe. I'll start with the economy. The U.S. economy is doing really well. But how to sustain this growth moving forward? Because there's always a recession looming around the corner.
Well, you know, the one thing about economies and recessions is sometimes you get hit unexpectedly and there's nothing you can do about it. All brilliant people, but there's nothing. One example was COVID. We had an economy going at levels like nobody had ever seen my first 2.5, 3 years. And then I heard the word pandemic, not COVID. They came up with that name over a period of time. We won't get into that.
Sir, we have a pandemic.
I heard the word pandemic. And I had a poll come out that was so strong just prior to that, and I was with the two best pollsters, McLaughlin and Fabrizio, and they said, sir, George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, if they came back and ran as president and vice president, they couldn't beat you. And then what happened is the following day, I was told to stay tuned because there's something really bad happening in China. There are bodies laying all over Wuhan, right around that certain building that we talk about. I always said it came from Wuhan. It did come from Wuhan. And they were body bags. We saw it by satellite. And they said, there are strange things happening in China. And so it began. And we ended up with the COVID, and the whole world suffered. We did a phenomenal job. I don't think we got the credit we deserved. We did something that Operation Warp Speed, which some people say was one of the greatest military feats ever. We did a great job. Used our military, used a lot of people. But sometimes you get hit with things, nothing you can do. You get hit with things like that unexpectedly. And we got through it. And when I left, the stock market was higher than it was previous to the COVID coming up. And I called it a great achievement. But things happen, bad things happen. The things that we can stop are wars if we're smart. That we can stop. Those are a matter of being intelligent and having intelligent people on the other side, because wars are the worst of all. Wars are worse than anything. But we can stop wars because that's sort of up to us. But things like
this is the former
dust
Norwegian
flying
Prime
in the
Minister,
air,
I'm
wherever
told.
COVID comes from or whatever comes, sometimes you have to be a little bit lucky. But we are poised to have an economy like no other, not only in this country, but anywhere. And you know, when you hear the kind of numbers that I can tell you that Scott Bessent was with me the other day, and he's looking at numbers. He said, I can't. And that's all he's done his whole life, pretty much your whole life. Scott, you weren't going to be a football player, I don't think. Scott was not that great at football, but he was always good at numbers, right? And he was looking at numbers. He said, I've never seen anything like this. We're poised to do things that no other country's ever done. And, you know, luck, I hate to say it, but we need a little luck. We don't want to get hit by something that nobody could have thought. Whoever thought we were going to hit by a pandemic? You know,
Okay.
when I heard the word pandemic,
we're not going to be able to see all this
an
way through to the
ancient
end, and
problem.
then of course there is the Joe
World
Kernan
War
interview.
I, they
So
lost 100
we'll drop the
million
president
people. It
for
actually
now.
ended
Full
World War
coverage
I.
of this, as well as of course the Supreme Court arguments, as well as the Joe Kernan interview, all tonight on Two-Way Tonight. So, gentlemen, that's the vice chair of, or the CEO rather, of the World Economic Forum, the former Norwegian Foreign Minister Borge Brende. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Anyway, quickly, thanks to our sponsors at Cozy Earth and CB Distillery, and our partners at Polymarket. Won't get to them today, but grateful to them for helping us with the show. Hogan, overall thoughts on where this leaves us now after the president's conciliatory but demanding remarks that he wants to see a deal. Where does that
Again,
leave
I
us?
think the mainstream media and the media writ large is kind of concerned about this Greenland situation. They want to cover it. So I think Donald Trump coming in and having a conversation about it kind of started kind of as one of those one-off jokes about taking Canada or Venezuela, and everyone kind of joked about it. And then Greenland became something bigger than that. And what that tells me is there's intel out there that lets them know that Russia and China are making serious plays for that landmass. And so him coming in there and saying, guys, we need to have a serious and sober-minded conversation about it is a very good move. Whether it's something gets done or not, we'll see. But Jaime, I think it's right. I think he's going to push for a deal sooner rather than later. And if he can come out of here with something, it looks like a massive success for the president at, potentially stopping our partners and allies around the world, but also America from facing almost certain military problems.
Jaime.
Yeah, no, I fully agree on that point. And I mentioned earlier, the one thing that I've been disappointed in, and he just spent too much time talking about former President Joe Biden in 2020, and that's just a pet peeve of mine. I'm annoyed by it. I do think, yet again, President Trump has an opportunity to have some success, and if he plays this thing right, this could be very, very, very consequential for the history of the world, and particularly our country. And then, thirdly, this Golden Dome, he hasn't talked about it for a while, but in the last 3 weeks, that's come back into conversation. So I'm looking forward to seeing more about the Golden Dome, how that conversation starts to play out, who he's bringing into the fold, how those contracts start to be doled out, and when we start to actually start implementing some of these initiatives under the Golden Dome. And then lastly, I think this speech was not necessarily for the American audience per se, and so I look forward to seeing what he's going to say in Iowa and what that road trip looks like as he go out and try to set things up for the midterm election. And then I look forward to seeing what those candidates, we're getting into primary season now in a lot of these battleground states. What are those candidates going to say once President Trump leaves their district over the next couple of months? And what message will they carry home, and what's going to be salient?
Yeah, all great points. I'll just say again that as important as Greenland is in the debate right now and in Davos, it's easy for reporters to scurry after European leaders in Davos and in European capitals and have them say, "Oh, the United States, or this is a rupture. We need to walk away. We need to be separate." Europe can't stand alone from the United States. They can't. Just on Ukraine, they can't stand alone. They can't stand alone in terms of the nuclear umbrella. They can't stand alone in terms of markets. They can't stand alone in terms of culture and technology. So the European countries can talk a big game, but Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio know that they have the high cards here.
Yeah.
So there'll be debates now. Don't lose sight of Ukraine. As I said, negotiations taking place apparently in Moscow tomorrow. Don't lose sight of the Board of Peace that the president's announcing in Davos. That's a massive story about how that's dividing the world as well. The housing policy the president talked about in his speech, he did more of it than I think some expected. Still don't quite get the location, but in any event, there'll be a robust conversation about that because that is, as everybody knows, one of the main issues for the American people. The Fed argument today, the chair of the Fed is attending the Supreme Court arguments taking place now. Another big story. J.D. Vance to Minnesota tomorrow, a big story. And the Clintons fighting with Comer is very active on Twitter right now. Their spokesman is calling out the Chairman Comer for talk. So my point is there's a lot of other big stories in the world, but we'll cover them all and talk about them all. But the Greenland story is going to be front and center as the president, again, finishes this Q&A, fireside Q&A, does his Joe Kernan interview, and then is in Davos through the day for a lot of meetings on all sorts of topics, including Ukraine and including the Board of Peace. Very grateful to Jaime and Hogan. Thank you guys for being here. A weird episode. Did our best to try to give you a conversation like no other. The speech is streaming live on every channel that I see here on my monitors, so it's available to you, but hopefully we added some value to you. Grateful to everybody who raised their hand and to all of those in the two-way community. Again, to our sponsors at Cozy Earth and CB Distillery, and I will see you at 6 o'clock tonight for a two-way tonight, and then back here tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Thank you, everybody, for spending the hour with us. Have a great day.
Great.
Thanks,
Mark.
guys.